Hi, I'm Gary Eckstein from organicweb.com.au and I'm a Mailchimp Pro partner. A frequent issue that people have when they need to import email addresses into Mailchimp or another email marketing system is that perhaps the first name and last name are in a single field. But Mailchimp, for example, requires that the first name is in a distinct field and the last name is in a distinct field. So the problem we're solving, and the problem I'll go through today, is how do we, if we have our first name and last names in a single field, in Excel for example, how do we separate out those fields for easy import into Mailchimp? I'll go through that right now. You'll notice that I'm in Excel at the moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of do in two phases this tutorial. At first, what we're going to do is we can see that the name on the screen at the moment is first name space last name. So I'll show how we can separate those out. Then what I'll do after that is I'll show what we can do if, and I'll just go into a different sheet, if it's comma separated, such as last name, comma, first name. What you'll also notice, which is fairly typical, is that the spacing's wrong. You know, there are a few empty characters here. Also, the case is incorrect. Some are all in uppercase, some names, some all in lowercase, and I'll show how we can get that case incorrect. It's fairly simple. I'm not going to go through in detail what I'm doing with each formula. I am going to include the link in the description of this video where you can copy these formulas. Also, I'm going to, in Excel, just to make it easier for demonstration purposes, I'm going to do things almost step by step, but if you know Excel well enough, you can always nest some of these functions I'm going to show, so you have less fields, but it'll make sense as we go on. So first of all, the first thing we're going to do is separate first and last name columns for easy import into Mailchimp. So what we expect here is, for example, Gary in one field and Eckstein in another. And by the way, please subscribe to my video if you find it useful. Please like this video. I'd very much appreciate it. Right. First thing we're going to do, therefore, is we are going to use the trim function, and that'll eliminate these, the empty sort of characters at the beginning here. So it's just more tidy. So all we need to do for that is, and I'll just copy it from a different screen and just show you. So all we'll do into this field here is we'll just enter equals trim and then the field. So in this case, in trim and B2, and I'll just copy this formula down, and you'll see now, for example, under George Lopez, it's removed that empty space. So trim and then just the field name, and I've just copied it down. Nice and simple, but it just tidies things up a little bit. So how do we now get the correct case? So it's not all in uppercase, it's not all in lowercase, it's correct. We use the Excel proper function. Nice and simple. I'll show that. So what we want to do in this case is we want to do the proper function on the C column, because we want to use the trim names here, so we don't have these empty spaces. So into the D field, for example, I'll just paste in equals proper and then the field C2, and I'll just copy this down. Nice and simple. So you'll notice now that, for example, Fiona Lim is capital F, capital L, and we got rid of the empty spaces before George Lopez, before Phil. So we first did the trim, we then did the proper. Now we want to separate out the first and the last names. This formula is fairly complicated, so you can just copy and paste it. But in this field here, so what I'm wanting to do is, because I've already trimmed and made this field the proper case, I'm wanting to use the data from here. I don't want to use it from this field, B2 for example, because it's in lowercase, it just, it's not that great. So I'll just paste in here my formula. Okay, pretty long formula. If is number search, and then we're looking for an empty space, because that's the separator here between the first and last name. Then return the first name, or the character, or the word before the first space. That's what we're saying here essentially, but you'll be able to copy and paste it from my website. So I'll just click enter, and you can see the first name comes up. So I'll just just drag and drop this, and now I have all the first names in this column. Nice and simple. But let's do this then for the last name. So I'm going to use this field, and I want everything after the space. I'm just going to grab my formula, which you can copy and paste. I'm going to go to the cell where I want to paste it in. I'll just paste it in. And this is slightly different than the one before, because here we're finding everything after the rightmost space in this case. And you'll notice it brings back Eckstein, my name. So there we go. We'll drag and drop it down, and there we go. So now what we have is we have the email address. Before, the name was kind of all over the place. It was uppercase, lowercase, there was, empty space and so on. And what we've ended up with is two different columns for the first name and last name. So I'll just write in here first name, just so that we know what we're dealing with. Let me just make this a little bit wider. I'm just going to type in here last name, so we know what we're dealing with. Nice and easy. If you're importing into Mailchimp, something I find handy is, what I would do now is just copy. So I've just highlighted the cell. I'm pressing Control-C or copying. On your Mac, sorry, it'll be different. And then I'm just pasting it in here. The reason I'm copying the email address here is because then when importing into Mailchimp, you can quite simply just copy the data and paste it in. The problem is if you copy and paste without adding the email address there, when we're importing into Mailchimp, you're just going to have to ignore these columns during the import. Not a big deal, right? But I just find it's easier just to import the actual data I want. So there I've got first name, last name, email address. Really, really simple, right? But what happens if it's comma separated? So you might export from Salesforce, from, I don't know, Zoho, from whatever, and perhaps, or Outlook for that matter. And when you get your CSV file, open it in Excel, you might notice that it's last name, comma, first name. This is easy to handle, and I'll just go through very quickly. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to trim, just like we did before. I'm going to go a little bit faster this time. So there we go. So our trim removes these strange empty characters, such as here, Chang, comma, Joe. Then we're going to do the same as we did last time. We're going to enter, or we're going to add the proper formula to get rid of uppercase and lowercase. There we go. So now it's in the proper format. We'll just copy and paste that down. There we go. All looking good. And you'll notice I've given some examples here where we don't have the last name, for example. So now we get the formulas change a bit to what we did previously. I'm going to enter here, just paste the formula, and you can get this on my website. There we go. So now we've got the last name, because this formula we're looking for, in this case, we're looking for the comma, and so on. And then let's just carry on to the next field here. And I'm just going to copy this, go to the field, paste, enter, drag and drop it down. Just nice and simple. You can do this very, very quickly. And it doesn't matter if you've got, one email address and name on your list, or you've got 10 million. It really doesn't matter. This works just as well. But you will notice now, because there was space after the comma, I need to use the trim command again. So I'm going to do this twice. So just for my last name, I'm going to trim again. I probably don't need to, but I'm just going to do it for safety. So I'm just going to type in here equals, let's go trim, open the bracket, enter the field, enter, and I'll just copy and paste this down just to get rid of those sort of those preceding empty spaces. And I'm going to do the same here, trim, and do this for, where was I? For the first name. And I'll just paste this down. There we go. So you'll notice, for example, that Fiona, you might not be able to see it, but Fiona has a space before her first name here. At least I've got rid of it here, so that's good. And again, I just like to copy and paste the email address in here. And if I want to, I can label these fields, first name, and let's label this, oops, that wasn't very good spelling, was it? And last name, for example. There we go. Now you can just copy this and paste it into Excel. So I've shown you two ways that we can separate if you have your first and last names of people in a single field. I showed you whether it was space separated or comma separated. We got rid of all the spacing, we got the casing correct, and it's all ready for import into whatever system you now need to. Please subscribe to my channel. Please like this video. My name is Gary from organicweb.com.au.